We are going to discuss the article I read that is titled Going Beyond the Fab Five, Helping Students Cope with the Linguistic Challenges of Expository Reading in Intermediate Grades. This article basically goes around and talks about the transition in primary grades when children learn to read to the intermediate grades when they have to read to learn. There are five stages of reading instruction that are what they call the Fab Five, which is phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension strategies. The author's issue with the Fab Five is that it doesn't adequately prepare students for basically STEM area subjects such as science, math, anything that basically you have to read a scholarly article about. It goes through the storybooks that uses common language to expository text, which is the dense articles that we usually read here at the college level. There are three pillars of reading that the author outlines. Number one was the understanding of the language, word sentences, discourse structure, and the way that the story is constructed. The second is the possession of relevant experiences and background knowledge that are stated, assumed, implied, or taken for granted in the text. Now, this particular pillar could be a problem for our ELL students. The third is the command of a repertoire of self-regulating strategies, being able to basically take what you're reading and being able to understand it, or to read a story and to create a picture in your mind of what it is all about. The problem, especially with the ELLs, begins with the storybook phase in the primary grades. Basically, storybooks, to understand them, children have to have a basic knowledge here in the United States of Western culture, capitalism, certain things that our society revolves around in order to be able to take the information in and actually be able to understand it. The easiest way for me to be able to discuss the difference between storybook reading and expository reading is basically the difference from you looking on your phone and reading what people are saying on Facebook as compared to you reading a scholarly article about DNA for a science class. There are many challenges to expository reading, mainly the technicality. There are a lot of words that are specifically created for certain fields, uh, like DNA, or just other words that, like if you're an engineering student working with engineering terms, that creates a problem for people who are trying to understand something outside of their wheelhouse. The abstraction is another one. Often common verbs are used as nouns. Discovery and beginning being examples that I've written down there. Uh, the problem with this is it creates a problem with the understanding because in expository reading, it is used to discuss previous works uh, about the theory or studies that have occurred previously in the field. The third is the density of the information. We've all tried to read scholarly articles, and they are very difficult. And the third or the fourth is authoritativeness. Basically, in a storybook, it is very first person, and in scholarly articles or expository reading, the author has a distance between himself and the information. The author does outline certain ways to help our students to be able to better transition from learning to read to reading to learn. And some of the author's ideas are um, more exposure early on in a child's life to National Geographic Kids or Kids Discover or the Franklin the Turtle or any of those easier reads that get them more exposure to the kind of density that they will experience later on in life. The second is noun deconstruction. Basically, they talk about teaching children to be able to break down the information into easier parts to be able to understand. they suggested doing this by playing games, basically like a telephone, where you create a story where you want to add more detail about something. And it seemed like a pretty interesting way to get kids more actively involved, um, and actually teaching themselves how to do something like this. I also believe that that would also help them in their writing later on down the road. The third was syntactic anatomy. I know some of these words are very technical, and this kind of alludes to um, basically the field words that we discussed earlier, um, and how they are sometimes a little more difficult to understand. With syntactic anatomy, basically teachers need to break down the different parts of a sentence and to be able to show how one sentence fits into a paragraph and how certain words, transitionary words, are used to accompany following sentences to create a more dense and more detailed thought. And the last is to paraphrase. I believe this kind of goes with syntactic anatomy as far as you have to be able to read something so dense and then be able to put it into more layman terms for yourself to be able to understand. I know that has been one of the things that I have used to be able to better understand some of the scholarly articles that I've had to read.